Tíoibh, Mhóirí. Déad míle fáilte rud, tá sé 7 log agus mar sin, tá sé chomh an tús a chur leis an seminar seo Aghaidh Linn an Aistriú on mBunscoil chuig an Iar-bhunscoil. So parents, teachers and listeners and people who are watching tonight or who are with us tonight, you're very, very welcome to this bilingual session on the transfer, I suppose, of students from the primary school into the secondary school. And I'm just kind of waiting for a few minutes because people are kind of coming in. We have up to nearly 150 people registered for this seminar online tonight. So since was like Céad Chuige duine ó Gaelcholáiste sa tír an tríchadó contae gotibh tuismitheoirí Gaeltachta, tuismitheoirí Gaelscoileanna, múinteoirí Gaelscoileanna agus múinteoirí Gaeltachta. Agus tá mar dúirt me tá míle fáilte rúd fad. Is mis Michael McDonagh agus is báil mé go Bhaird ratha Gaeloideachas. And I will be your host for this evening. I'm a primary teacher myself, so I've kind of, but I have been involved with Gaeloideachas for the last few years, as well as other organizations. So I'll be bringing you through tonight, introducing the speakers that we have, and at the end, maybe answering a few questions that people have kindly sent in the last week or so while they were registering for this course. So fecim go couple of the Gaeltacht gesteach. So the rare chéile. So just couple of rud. We are recording tonight's meeting, half of that thing, so that if there's people who couldn't be with us tonight, who might have registered but couldn't come, or somebody else that might hear about this seminar, and it will be on Gaeltacht in the coming week or so. The second thing is you don't need your microphone. You actually don't need your camera, because sometimes it's much easier for broadband and all of that to maybe not to have your camera on. And you don't need your chat function either tonight. So mata a microphone agus na camera ar siúlagad is féidir leat iad a bhucha inis when you has them fiad agus laidín sin brú atá ed on broadband agus ed an Aghaidh Linn agus mar. Is few a lua ag an buinte seo go bhfuil go leor réimsí difriúla áiseanna síobh Gaeloideachas. Agus ceannach of sin agus be méid teachtar eise go seán Ceisteanna ná go mbíonn nuacht letir againn huirsa ratha huirsa sa bhí go hismitheoirí. So I would advise people who are more interested in this or who might want to read further on with this to look at Gaeloideachas website, because not only is there a full range of material for parents, for schools, for teachers, available online on the website, but also we sent out a newsletter every month or so for parents, just giving you up-to-date information about the teaching through Irish, the apps that are to be found out there, all that kind of support. And if you're interested in that, all the details about signing up is online. An sesiún nach tá sé timpeall huairich leig. Agus beis mar dúirt me ben was cains faoi an Aistriú ó mBunscoil chuig an Iar-bhunscoil. There's a lot of transfer, there's a lot of transferring, if you can call it that way, between for children in the education system. I suppose the first one is when they actually go to the local NINRA. There's a certain amount of, I suppose, anxiety and worry from parents' perspective and from children's perspective on that. The next transfers happens from the NINRA to the local national school. And then the one I suppose we're talking about tonight, the whole transfer between primary school and secondary school. And indeed, there's a certain worries or anxiety or maybe question that comes around even from transferring from secondary school to third level. But tonight we're looking at the transfer of primary level into secondary level. Bhunscoil Isteach in Iar-bhunscoil. There's different scenarios in this. There's different people. I know, like, there's different perspectives from some of the parents online tonight. Some of you are maybe parents of children that have been to an English medium school, primary school, and that are entering into a secondary medium Irish school. And I could congratulate you on that. Basically, Cuideachí agus go bhfuil báistí scoil Gaeltachta, no Gaelscoil, tá tríbhán na Gaeilge, agus in isise tá go le agatí mBunscoil, no Gaelscoil, atá fáin with trí Gaeilge, agus ríist bei bagantí in Seachanacht. So we're trying to cater as much as we can for the broad sense of different people, our different questions and everything that came in tonight on our panel. And the other thing I would say as well, there was a lot of questions that came in, and what we've done is that we've actually asked the speakers tonight maybe to reflect on those questions, and maybe looking at those questions, and that they have incorporated the answers to as much as possible, that they can answer them into their presentations tonight. So my to by an cheist fragraí beidir le líon an Gaeloideachas a bheits ag ar gaintúirí nach. Agus freisin bei cúpla ceiste go nigin deire go mé muid an ná bhreabró seis. But don't forget also that we're very open to answering any kind of questions that you might become aware of tonight, or that you might think of tonight. And again, if you go onto our website, you can send it to Gaeloideachas, and we will come back to you, as I said, over the next few weeks. This is one of our seminars online for parents and for teachers, and details of other ones that we've done on dyslexia and other supports are all online, and details of the ones that we'll be doing, suppose, out in the coming up in the autumn, we will talk about later, some of them, and also any information about them will be on the site. So without further ado now, I think most people are in. I'll ask you to sit back and relax and enjoy our speakers. Agus nacht tá Bhaird túirí againn fan na Gaeloideachas Fíona. Bhaird is doch go bhfuil taithí na milliánta acab brudí difriúla a bhainans le Gaeloideachas dára level. We have two excellent speakers who have between them years of experience of different aspects of secondary school or education in Tríbhán na Gaeilge. Dús bei Pádraig Mac an Bhaird ag Cantling, agus Marach in Chivinchin is Cóirleoir Trórach ag Pádraig, Coláiste hÍde a Mala Clia, agus tá taithí na mblianta ag Pádraig, agus ní bháin a bheith mar chóirleoir Trórach, a freisin a bheith múna ábharacha difriú le lelín na chuide síl muinteoireachta. Agus in sin an dhé sin bei Fíona Uiginn, agus a ríist, bhí Fíona mar uachtarán ag Gaeloideachas, agus níos tá sí fáim mar leas uachtarán Gaeloideachas, agus go dtéireann bhí sí mar phríomhaide ar Coláiste Íosagáin, Coláiste mBunscoil mór in sin a Mala Clia. Agus ní bhain go sí mar phríomhaide ach bhain sí ábhainán, agus rinne sí go leor me cínte go leor a dhéile, agus me taithí bidá. So the two speakers, as I said, have a wealth of experience, and they have incorporated some of your questions and some of the, I suppose, the question that comes up every year. Can I just say just one small thing before we do start? I suppose this year is different. It has placed probably more pressure on parents, on schools, and I suppose on children. Because one of the experiences that we've had in primary schools the last few years is that we have incorporated a few activities to make this transfer easier for children. That was a little bit harder to do maybe online this year. But the other thing that I sometimes think we forget as well, that children talk among themselves, and that they get time in school, maybe even on the yard or at different times, to even when they're doing activities outside school to maybe discuss these things and talk about these things, and maybe talk about their worries or talk about some questions that they had. And I suppose this year, that wasn't available for a lot of children. And so we're kind of aware of that. So the speakers will be aware of that, and they will be making references maybe to the present circumstances this year. The other thing I should probably say as well is that we don't actually know. We know as much as you probably do as regards opening the schools. Things might change, as you know yourselves, between now and the end of August. And I suppose and so we try to bring that into the advice and the discussion as we're going. So without further ado then, Bhualim Iar-bhunscoil Mac an Bhaird, Písa Cainte Íona, agus Pádraig Cuilim Fáilte Mórad agus Cuilimahada Chabion.
Gur míle maithigh a bhíhal agus gur míle maithigh of histí agus mata sean histe nó daldaigin fiúin poisteigin and sin Aghaidh Linn agus ar lanúint tá céad fáilte rómh. So good evening everybody, and you're all very, very welcome to the webinar. Micheál has done a great job at introducing me, so I'm just going to jump straight in and get talking about what I agreed to talk about. So I'm going to be looking at two points. Cad Gaesh leis an Aistriú ón mBunscoil go dtí Iar-bhunscoil, from primary school to secondary or post-primary school. What's involved in it? Agus if redó conas gur féidir le tiste tacu leis a fáiste. How can you as a parent support the student or the child, if you're a grandparent perhaps in that role as well. I'm hoping that you get sort of some practical ideas. As Micheál said, we've a broad range of experiences of students moving from perhaps English medium school into the Gaelscoil, or from a Gaelscoil into a Gaelscoil, or indeed students perhaps maybe with a special need, and all the different sort of elements that make up or students that make up the school community. So we've tried to incorporate include as many different perspectives as we can in the presentation. So the next slide, then those are really our two questions. As Micheál said in his introduction, Aistriú agus Aistriú ón mBunscoil go dtí an Iar-bhunscoil, from the transition from the primary to the post-primary is not a new experience in some ways, because students in many instances have done this at least once already, if not possibly twice. And as Micheál outlined, 8 years ago, your son or your daughter or your grandson, or indeed you as a student, started a new chapter in your life when you went to primary school. And prior to that, perhaps you went to an INRA as well, or a preschool or Montessori or something. So it's important to kind of bear that in mind, because that experience can serve us well, even though it's a sort of it's going to be a different one as well. So what's different about the post-primary school? And these are some of the main differences really, or things involved in the change and the transition. So áit nua le córas nua, just simply that it's a new place. That new place can be bigger or perhaps smaller. It may involve a different timetable between to and getting from school. Obviously there are it's a different system. There are, instead of perhaps one teacher that the student sees all day, every day, then they can see up to perhaps 9 teachers per day. Classes generally are 40 minutes or an hour, and there are new subjects involved. Perhaps with the old subjects there's new content. Ever though in the timetable, as I've already mentioned, can be different. It can be, of course, one of the biggest differences can often be that the school day is longer. And when I talk to students in my role as guidance counsellor, it's often one of the things that they notice and find a bit of a challenge at the beginning. If we're a 3 inchin, the daoine nua, of course, that's a big one. That between, as I said already, there are new teachers to get used to, and some of them can be more stricter than others, or come across as more strict than others. There are new students, the students that the friends and students that they had from their primary school. Some of them may continue on to the new secondary school. Some of them may not. So in that sense, there's challenges around kind of forming friendships and group dynamics and that as well. Of course, the other thing as well is that the student goes from being the big fish in second class into being the little fish in a big pond very often, and that can be somewhat daunting and a bit of a challenge as well. And then, of course, Puinte Caharinchen, the being on Dalta Hínig Aistriú, or Aghaidh, you know, they're on the threshold of adolescence, and if you haven't already realised it at some stage, maybe within the next year or within a little bit after that, you may wake up one day and realise, you know, your darling son or daughter has gone somewhere to Mars or to Venus, and somebody else has come back in their place. So rather than that pleasant child who's smiling, then, you know, you get somebody full of perhaps maybe he's a bit more irritable or is not talking, or all the challenges and the changes that take place at adolescence. So the student themselves is navigating all of that while at the same time being in a completely new environment. And Puinte Scorinchen, in terms of the change as well, of course, as Micheál alluded to earlier, we've got the added change this year of COVID and how to navigate all of that. So if we move on to the next slide, in terms of what can be of use, or what do you need to kind of take into account in terms of the arts nua known Tamtlar nua. Getting around, of course, can be a bit of you know, it's a challenge and it's something to get used to, because the building is new, it may be bigger, maybe there are more corridors. You know, under normal situations, possibly the student will be moving from classroom to classroom. This year with COVID-19, that may change. They may be based in one classroom. But what are the kind of things that perhaps you can do as a student, or indeed as a parent, to kind of get ready for that? And one of, you know, on a practical level, if the student can become familiar with the new building, the surroundings, then that can help them just prepare a little bit. So a good place to start, perhaps, you know, some schools actually may have done this already. Some primary or post-primary schools may have sent information to the primary feeder schools, and they may have sent a map of the school, or indeed they may have been in touch kind of with you. But if they haven't, perhaps a good place to start is the school website. Many schools will have links there to perhaps things like a map of the school, and I know some schools are talking about having perhaps video and kind of the building, and perhaps sending that out to students. So I suppose really, I'd say, if at all possible, try and become familiar with the school. And that even could be something as simple as, if you haven't already, or if the student hasn't already visited, you know, drive up to the school gates, drive by it, have a little look. Perhaps coming into August, when schools are starting back, you know, if you another option might be just ring up the school and, you know, ask them, can you go in and have a look around? Because if the student is a little bit more familiar, the more familiar they are kind of with the environment, the less perhaps nervous they'll be going in there. Under normal circumstances as well, many schools will often have Creineú, being Creineú Tusna Bliana, it's sort of a welcoming evening to provide information to parents. That may happen, you know, in a physical sense, or it could be something like this scenario this year as well. So as Micheál said, we're not really sure how what schools will be doing, but you know, it's generally, I suppose, the one thing that I would say too is that, you know, secondary schools we're very mindful of the fact that students are making this big change, and many things they will often do different initiatives and things to help students settle in. And your secondary school has probably been in touch already with your primary school, and you know, they will have got information from the teachers. Maybe as a student you've visited already to do some entrance tests, like assessments, and then the primary school will be filling in an educational passport, which they will be sending to the secondary school as well. So the school will get information about you, so don't worry that the student is coming in completely cold and that the teacher is going to be looking at them thinking, who is this person? So Puinte Dóinsin and Tamtlar sa Scoil, again, you know, can be, as I said, is a big sort of jump for a student, and even just reading a basic timetable can be a bit of a nightmare or a bit of a challenge. And on a practical level, what I would say is, practice that with the student. I have a link at the very end of my section here to sort of a workbook, and there's a sample timetable as Sperla in it, and that's actually there's a video to go along with it as well. So you can, as a parent or indeed as a student, you can take it out and just sort of practice and become familiar with, okay, how many classes might there be of maths a week, and practicing things like what time, what are your first 3 classes in the day before break time, or what are your last 3 classes. And then when the timetable itself comes, you can, again, for the first perhaps week or 2 weeks, something like that, it's a good idea to perhaps sit down with the student and just run through those things with them, so that the more they become familiar with the timetable, the easier it will be to help them to settle in. I would suggest as well that you have multiple copies of it. A copy perhaps at home on the fridge door, or wherever the student's going to be doing in the work, maybe at the desk in the room. A copy in the school journal, which they'll probably get when they go back to school. And again, if they're going to be using a locker, then maybe a smaller version of it, and just take in a little bit of blue tack or sellotape and sellotape it onto the inside of the locker door. It just makes it a little bit easier when it comes to kind of opening the bag and trying to sort out what books and materials need to go in. Okay, so moving on then to our next slide. So links in with the previous one in terms of equipment and organisation. And I suppose not only is it a change in terms of being in the actual school itself, but there's also a change in terms of getting to and from school. So in terms of getting the student ready, it can be just sort of planning and having to think around, okay, what time will I need to get up at? What time will I need to leave the school at, or the house at? What time, incorporating perhaps a little bit of extra time just in case there's traffic. When I finish school, if I'm taking public transport, how will I get the transport? And if the student perhaps is taking public transport, perhaps current circumstances might be a little bit difficult, or if they're cycling or something like that and they're a little bit nervous, can be often no harm. Again, just do a trial run. Just gives them confidence of, okay, this is the way to go, and this is how long it's going to take me. And if you're a little bit nervous as a parent, letting them out on their own, maybe you can just sort of follow at a safe distance behind. If they're taking public transport, you might like to kind of, hop on the bus, but sit away from them. Oftentimes they not want you sitting near them, but it's a sort of a way of just checking that they're okay. Okay. Híde sin hÍde agus Trallah Scoile. Organisation around, of course, it's all new in terms of the equipment and the clothes to wear and the uniforms, and little tips. Always useful to have at least 2 ties, just in case one goes amiss. Second, uniform, perhaps if one's been washed and there's no one been available, and writing the name on everything, that is hugely important in case some of the equipment goes missing. It can be easily found or returned to the person if the name is on it. I'd also say that the general point, have the student with you when you're purchasing items and when you're kind of getting ready for the transition, because the more involved they are, the more they will take ownership of it. If you have any expensive coats or jackets, my advice would be leave them at home. You might want to talk to the student about that, because if they go missing and a couple of hundred worth need to be replaced, that can be a source of tension that perhaps could be avoided. And when the student school will send out at some stage between now and starting back some information about start dates and maybe equipment needed, or if there's books need to be bought, or if there's a book rental scheme or whatever. But when the student starts in and the first week or 2, if they're not given one in school, it's a good idea just to kind of put together a little page with the student, 2 columns even. 1 column are the subjects, 2nd column then are what are the equipment that I need. And organisation is a big challenge for students, because there's lots involved in it, and can be very good even with the student if they're willing to sort of almost show you or do it along with them for the first while packing their bag for the next day. I suggest you do it the night before. The more that can be prepared the night before, the easier the morning is when everybody's getting up and getting ready and getting out to school. So, you know, if they may be open to sort of sitting alongside them doing it and just literally going through, okay, what are we using the 2 sheets? What subjects have I got tomorrow? What equipment do I need? And making sure even that it's sort of packed the same way in the bag, so that the more sort of structured it is, the more the student will be familiar, and it will be easier. And then if you want to sort of take your foot off the pedal after a week or two and just let them, you know, gauge it, that you sense, okay, they're well able to do it themselves now, then you can give them free rein. So if we move on then to our next slide, I've mentioned planning the use of the school bag and the locker. Of course, the locker, as I mentioned, in new COVID land, there may not be use of a locker this year. Perhaps the school may have tablets, or it may not have. It may be all using textbooks, it may not. But you know, where those are used, again, it's just at home as a parent or even as a student, you can have a little look and just prepare the night before what you're going to need. And in terms of bringing in books, I mean, if there is a locker, you know, very often if a school timetable is 3 classes a break, 3 classes a break and 3 classes, then it's good to get the student into the habit of, we'll go into the locker at, you know, 11 o'clock, the first break, 11 lunchtime at the end of the day, and all they need are kind of 3 sets of books and equipment for each session, and then they need to bring home in the bag what homework they have for the following day. So homework as well, in terms of the organisation, my advice would be try and establish a routine for homework early evening. You know, when a student comes home, they might want to have a little break or a snack or something like that, but homework, they're going to be fresher, you know, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock than they're going to be at 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. And when we're fresher, we get things done quicker. And that way, I suppose too, there are less arguments arising. So a key piece of equipment that the student will have to get used to, and indeed perhaps they're doing already in primary school, would be in Zealand, the journal. And the journal often has very important information at the front of it. It'll often have a space for the timetable, which is good to write it into. It'll often have kind of information on things like anti-bullying, certain policies that the school would have, for example, acceptable use policy of technologies. And when you get the journal, good idea to go through with the student some of the key pages and chat to them about kind of their understanding, and do they understand what's involved here with that part, and so on. And I should say as well that, you know, as part of the transition, schools will generally have some element of transition or some activities to help the students settle into first year. And that could be in the first week or 2 weeks. Many schools, as part of the wellbeing that I'm sure Fíona will mention later on, will have a module where it's very much practical based to help the students kind of work on things like I'm talking about, organisation, and SPHE, which they will be doing at secondary or primary school anyway, is also done at secondary school, and they will be looking at things like kind of friendships and so on. So there are sort of, in terms of the curricular and in terms of class time, as it were, there are spaces that are used in the calendar to help the students kind of make that transition. Okay. So moving on then to our next slide, we mentioned about new people and the challenges between teachers and friends and so on. And I suppose with the challenge there oftentimes can be just getting to know who is who. So again, on the school website, or some information should be given to you around what are the supports. Is there a, you know, every school will have a pastoral care system. Generally, there'll be people like a tutor or a class teacher. The student may meet them a few minutes per day, or they may meet them more than, it could be 10 minutes every day, or it could be a few minutes on certain days. Schools will generally have a guidance counsellor. although I would add that not every school has a full-time guidance counsellor. This guidance counsellor may be teaching a subject as well, but they will have a SEN coordinator, special educational needs coordinator, and many schools will often have systems like a buddy system or a mentor system, whereby the older students would sort of look after, mind, if you like, the younger students when they come in. Schools will often have things like kind of friendship weeks as well, where they will be kind of working to try and help the students kind of make friends. So very important to find out, okay, what are the supports? If in terms of pastoral care, who are the key people that as a parent or a student, if I have a problem, who do I go to? And I should say as well, many schools will have what they call a care team, or a pastoral care team, or a student support team. They're just three names for the same thing, which is in essence whereby key people involved in pastoral support will come together, maybe on a weekly or every 2 weeks or something like that. And if there are concerns about a student, they'll kind of have a discussion and say, put a plan in place, a little bit of a plan in terms of how to help the student. So if you're not sure, ask the school, okay, what are the supports? Who's the key person that I need to go to? I often find that parents, when they're coming in, will often go directly to the principal, and that's probably something that kind of they're used to doing in primary school. But generally speaking, as I said, the system is different in secondary, and oftentimes the principal or indeed the deputy principal may not be available. So, and it could be perhaps a year head or the class tutor who you need to go to first. And again, it can be as simple as just picking up the phone or sending an email or sending a note in the journal. They're there, the guidance counsellor is there. You know, if you're as a parent, you want to talk to the likes of the guidance counsellor, there's absolutely no problem. And indeed, I'm sure they're very welcome, and or the special education needs coordinator, same idea, all very welcome to if and when they have a few minutes to speak to people. So cards is agus bullaíocht, friendship, again, we said kind of moving from a place where perhaps we leave friends behind, maybe we take on new friends. Those can be challenges, but a few little tips, you know, could be just between now and then in terms of COVID-19 and helping the students sort of move out of their circle again. Encourage the students to meet up with their friends over the summer. Perhaps they, you know, if they're a little bit shy about making friends, you might want to kind of role play a little bit with them, or indeed maybe the student themselves might want to just practice a little bit in front of the mirror. Simple little things like smiling, saying their name, introducing themselves, and asking, perhaps practicing to ask the friend or the other person, what are their hobbies, even what do they like doing, and what are they doing at break time. You know, those 4 simple things can oftentimes start a conversation and a connection.
Now you can talk I'm just conscious that I'm wise, so
Mosey.
Yeah, please, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say as well that I suppose key thing I'd say in terms of as a parent, helping the student navigate the transition is speak to them. You know, have the chats with them. Oftentimes it can be in the car when you're driving to and from, or you're out walking the dog, or situations like that, and listen and acknowledge, you know, the kind of worries and fears that perhaps you have as a parent, they may have as well, or indeed they may not. And maybe just reassure them that you know, all the students are going to be facing the same things, and there are plenty of supports there. As a parent, just offer to help as well, and maybe work on finding solutions together. So if we maybe just some final points in terms of you know, supports, as it were. It is a change for both you and the child. You know, your son or your daughter's leaving the nest. As we mentioned at the beginning, it is challenging, but you know, both you as a parent and your son or your daughter have prior experience. And I would say, I suppose, mind your own anxiety. You know, the phrase mocking is catching, so too is anxiety. But so too is, you know, when somebody is kind of calm and at peace. Involve the child in where possible with the activities. You know, do activities with them, but not for them. You know, it's not a case of the more you do for them, the more you disempower them in some ways. So it's about being alongside them rather than doing the things for them. And then finally, I'd say gather information. You know, I've mentioned that already. Do the preparation and look for support. And on the final slide of my presentation there, I have some further areas where you might want to look for further information. First one, as I said, was a kind of a workbook that you could work between now and then. That's the one with the video, and there are other articles there around making the transition. And in terms of support, don't forget the likes of the National Parents Post-Primary National Council, Post-Primary, Council, and the likes of NEPs in terms of well-being and resources like that. Okay.
A bit of homework there for you at the very end of that reading throughout the summer months. Just to let you know, as I said, this is being recorded, but also the PowerPoints will be available on Gaeloideachas.ie in the coming days. So by so it's about 8:30, 25 to 9, going to 8-ish. So I'm going to go straight ahead to Fíona. Fíona again. So Fíona, go to Míle Mahagad Agus.
Yeah, but just while I'm saying, Teachtas made it durch a two seconds foilte church the Tishmori or father in webinar shall not August Tasulam my made it the ragam set Usagáin Carachti with coming from Bugger Rai Lorach and Ishkidin the Duline August Nadeshina of one and Lesson Aistriú mBunscoil Gudin Iar-bhunscoil. Calendar would be a small page of my shift Shabur if we now Kursi Grady and the August Secretary and Shin Clachta young and small practice makes perfect. This has really been an exceptional year for your children because since the schools closed on the 12th of March, they won't have had the same opportunities, many of them, to use the Irish that they have, which means that for some of them, they'll have to hold 6 months with very little opportunity by the time they go back to school at the end of August. So I'm going to go through some of the possibilities and ways that you can perhaps support them and help them. They've had a lot of opportunity, as I said, they're Aistriú, Aistriú, Gaeltacht, Van Lehu. And they've also had a few opportunities to attend summer courses in Coláiste, where I was principal and deputy principal for 20 years. We would have recommended to many of the students to take a Gaeltacht course, maybe a short fortnight course before they began, particularly those coming from English medium primary schools. That's not available this year. So, how can you perhaps compensate? What can you do to help them? Would you write a D&K slide, Ella? Now, the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the excellent newsletter which Gaeloideachas has issued recently with a comprehensive list of excellent resources that you can draw on now with your son or daughter. If you haven't had a copy of this, I think it might have been sent out with the Zoom invitation today, but it will be emailed to you after this webinar. And I'm going to go through it with you now because the newsletter is in fact in Irish and some of you may be put off by that and not maybe gone through it yourself, but it's been a terrible pity to miss out on the opportunity to avail of the many resources. The only difficulty that might arise, and I'm in Kerry now at the moment, normally residing in Dublin, I'm very aware of the problems with broadband, access to broadband, and how important it is to have good access to broadband in order to be able to make maximum use of these resources. That's something maybe to think about and look at for next year when your son or daughter is beginning post-primary school. So there's a wide range of resources in the newsletter, and I'll just go on to the next slide now where we'll see a kind of a bingo page with a list. It's part of the newsletter, and it has a list of 24 different activities, and it would be a good thing maybe to make a photocopy of this or print it out and put it up again on the fridge door and maybe tick off the various things as they participated or completed them, and maybe a little prize at the end. Some of them, they won't obviously get to all 24 of them, but there's a lot of suggestions there. So if you go through that page along with the newsletter and pick out a number of activities and encourage them to participate in them. So what is actually in the newsletter? If we go on to the next slide, there's a whole range of activities, sport, obviously fitness and sport. There's yoga and mindfulness activities, and you can just click on them and they'll bring you into maybe Pádraig Mac doing some excellent yoga teacher. There's also skill in the Amon agus Pella hurling and football skills with Colm O'Driscoll, the principal of Scoláiste, or Kieran Kilkenny, who I presume I don't have to introduce particularly to all the dubs anyway. And then there's even a Dendausa video that you can look at with hip hop and even shamnose dancing. Lots of activities there for physical exercise. And then we go on to the next slide. The next area I'd like to draw your attention to in the newsletter is the list of reading material that's available over the summer. It's more difficult maybe than with the physical activity to get them reading. But there's a link, there are links to, and you'll see it on the next slide, but we won't come to that yet, for reading material that caters to all different reading levels and interests. Now, I've started with maybe the simpler ones and gone on to more challenging ones. And a very, very good way to start is a series of booklets called Baha le Bua. And these are short biographies which are accessible online, from Roy Keane to J.K. Rowling to Nelson Mandela, all kinds of interesting people. They're short, they're snappy, they're easy to read. You'd read them in 20 minutes sitting down. There's also, for really reluctant readers, a very good way of getting them interested is this e-Lana or e-page produced by the Freble students in Maynooth Teacher Training College. And it's just literally one page. I saw a more recent one was a picture of Ming Flanagan and his unfortunate incident in front of the camera, which to the European Parliament, which was an interesting and funny read and very simple. Then there's two newsletters about science that would be used, particularly Leon and Dula is a very attractive natural history and nature resource. Epic is an Irish magazine for young people. It's $3.50. There are some free examples on it online, and it's again another very attractive read. Now, ag smaoine ver galfi was Gaeilge ní Searachub, tá cór óg an agus bhí an annachid cursi litríocht an sin, don the filiocht scéal de scrífeich í yoga agus tá sé níos dúláníach an simú. Agus an sin rud nua tá taka ar an bódach, so tá teach má ceirúir sa blian inis. Ná iris nua ag an Common Luke Class Grade and CLG, the GA's new magazine, agus tá sé an iarúna an tarringteach ar fad. Cuaille is the name of it. It's available online, agus tá sé an iarúna for galfi with Gaeilge Oaxaca agus choirthe a chainteoirí dúchas Gaeilge. So an mulla tá agam sa ní féidir í teach ar fad a léibh ní bheith ag iar ar aon duine sin íana peach amach cúpla ceanna tá iarúnach pick out a few that are suitable and for the reading ability of your own child, and sit down and read with them. You can start off the reading yourself and then let them progress themselves. So the next slide, you'll see the links to all of those. You can see, just click on those links and they will come up for you, and you just very simply print off a few or sit and read with them on the tablet or on the computer. Okay, so Biggie Alev, that's that resource for you on reading. So Raigan Ishkadi and Kate Can Ella. The next slide, Aistriú agus listening and speaking. Now, you'll all have been aware that while the homeschool hub was on RTE during the lockdown, that Cúla Cahar or Skull was available on TG Cahar. This is similar to, for those who weren't familiar with it, it was half an hour every day, and there's actually an archive of them available on YouTube, Cúla Cahar, and they're arranged by age and themes, and they were really very good and would be an excellent for 6th class pupils transferring to 2nd level. Lots of vocabulary, lots of opportunity just to listen to Irish. It's just the opportunity to listen and understand on a daily basis. But if you don't want to go back over them at the moment, and really another excellent resort that you may not be aware of, but every day on TG Cahar at the moment and for 5 weeks, it started last week, so we're in week 2 now of the 5 weeks, there's a Compa Cúla Cahar. And the Compa Cúla Cahar is a theme, it's on from 10 o'clock to 25 past 10 every day. And they have a theme, and one of the theme of this week, for example, is traditional Irish art. So they're looking at dance, song, poetry, lubini, which is what we used to be called maybe Aghaidh Linn, and even rap. I don't know how that comes under traditional Irish arts, but anyway, we won't go on about that. And after that then, at 25 past 10, for another half an hour, there is a GAA Cúla camp, and it's us Gaeilge, and I looked at it today, very attractive. Liam Rush, former Dublin hurler, Kate McGovey, a former student of mine, nutritionist, speaking about various aspects of nutrition and sport. Really very well presented, and a great opportunity for them to listen to Irish in an attractive way, and even better if you could take the time to sit down and watch it with them yourself, especially at the beginning, to get them into it. We're on to the next slide now, and Cursey Kill. So if your son or daughter is particularly interested in Cursey Kill, particularly Kill Coáiste, modern, contemporary music, there's TG Lurgan, and we all know about Coláiste Lurgan and their kind of contemporary versions of songs by, Codaline and people like that. That's available on TG Lurgan YouTube, and something that you could be listening to. There's also Kill Gobilis the Huchteg, which is another, was produced by Conran Aghaidh and Radio Reraw, an Irish version of recent hit songs. And Radio Reraw and Radio Litha are two Irish language radio stations which are geared towards young people, as opposed to Radio Gaeltacht, which we come to later. So I would recommend having a look at them, maybe in the car, encourage them to put them on their phones and listen to them. Kaint then, Iver Cuig. Pint is probably an gné is dúchlánaí, particularly if nobody at home has Irish. It's particularly challenging. So my idea here, and I would always have said this to new parents in Coláiste, is this is the opportunity now to lead by example. You learned Irish, remember, for 14 years in school. So you actually have a lot more Irish than you might think. And maybe some of us is rusting away there. Well, this is the opportunity now to brush down and use it. And you would actually be very much surprised by how much passive knowledge most people are of Irish they have. And when they go back to do a course later, they're just amazed. It's not like starting to learn German or French for the first time. You actually have an enormous passive knowledge there. And the best thing you can do for your child is to give a good example. And I'll just give you a small thing that you could start with. There is an Irish, there's a little louron or a booklet produced by Gaeloideachas called Den Córa, and it's available on the Gaeloideachas website. And you just actually Google Den Córa. It's downloadable, free. It's got very useful phrases and vocabulary for parents, and a lot of it directed towards things that they need in the early days of school. So I really recommend that. It's available free. There's all these resources available. It's really important that you take the opportunity now to use them. We'll go on to the next slide now. And we're talking about, that's continued from that. Yes, what can you do at home? Well, you can put on TG Cahir as often as you can and listen to it yourself. And because there are really excellent programs and a lot of them have subtitles. So, I mean, I don't know how many people who have a very limited knowledge of Irish tell me that it's a matter of choice now, because there's quite a lot of rubbish on some of the other channels, and if you're interested in Love Island or something, that they actually like to watch, particularly some of the Clóracha Fáisnéise or the documentary programs on TG Cahir. So that will really be a help for you, even just watching the news every evening, just a part of the news. Bhunscoil, you just want to do something very simple, and every day go on to the Iar-bhunscoil or the website of Gaelcholáiste and look at their phrase for the day. Usually very well presented, and try and, you know, get the family using it. There's also Duolingo, the app for your phone that you could use. Now, Radio na Gaeltacht is more challenging. It's for the, you know, for people who are fairly competent in Irish, and particularly Gaeloideachas, Aistriú. Also, an excellent resource is Tuairisc.ie, which is the Irish language. It used to be called Fluency, and then when it was printed, and now it's a digital newspaper called Tuairisc.ie, and it has a very, very attractive presentation of all the news stories, but it also has a learners section. There's a folum, and if you look at the side, you'll see it has some exercises and some so that you could use yourself and to improve your Irish. So Murder made Kawadni Smoke Gaelige Gapan to so Baha Changa Iar-bhunscoil you've set down this challenge for your child to do their education through Irish, so you're now going to lead by example. So don't forget about the bingo page and get learning with your child. I'm looking out here now, Kerry, at the atrocious weather. We've had nothing but rain for the last 2 to 3 days. So there is a very good excuse to use these resources to entertain your child and even to entertain yourself. So Aghaidh Linn and Ischkiti and Céad Leathanach Eile, curriculum agus esh curriculum. Now, I'm just going to go through this. In the old, not in the old days, prior to the new junior cycle, so where we would have talked about the first 3 years of post-primary as preparing the children for the junior search. The first 3 years of post-primary are now called the junior cycle. So the 3 years are preparation for the junior cycle exams at the end of 3rd year. So used in the past to do maybe even 11, 12, 13 subjects in some schools, but now there is a maximum limit of 10 subjects. So they can do 8 and between 8 and 10 subjects, and they can do some short courses as well. So I don't know if your school is offering short courses, but most schools are probably offering that they do 8, 9, or 10 full subjects. Now, on that, they would be the core academic curriculum. On top of that, we have co-curricular subjects. And this is a new thing that has come in with the new junior cycle. There's a whole new area of learning called Fíona, or well-being. And that comprises Iar-bhunscoil, PE, Iosagáin, which would be health, personal health education, and that includes RSE, which is relationships and sexuality education, and that would be a module. They usually have 1 period a week, and you would be thinking now that usually teachers, it's very often maybe the guidance counsellor, the class teacher, the year head who takes that class, they'll all have been trained up in it, and they will take them through settling into the new school. That will be a large part of what they do in September and October, dealing with the various issues. And then later in the year, they'll have a module of relationships and sexuality education, and they will, of course, be addressing the issues of COVID and hÍde during that class as well. Schools will also have religious education. In Coláiste, Íosagáin, for example, we included choir as part of the full liner wellbeing. Don't know whether we're going to be allowed to do choir now in the autumn. Takiach Fólma learning support. Just want to say a word about that. Pádraig mentioned the fact that this passport or information has gone from the primary school now in the last number of years. It's become part of the transition from primary to secondary, that your passport goes with you. The school will really have given information from your 6th class teacher, including some STEM results. Now, that's not something to be worried about. Some parents are always very worried, oh, the teachers will put my child in a box. That's not what happens. The STEM results are an assistance. Say, for example, if I'm going and teaching a history class in first year, I'll have a quick look at the STEM, and I'll have an idea then if there's anybody in the class who maybe has difficulties with vocabulary or literacy, and I'll be able to tailor my teaching in order to facilitate, differentiate my teaching, to take their needs into consideration. So it's very important that you don't worry about making the school aware if your child has any particular special education needs or riachtanis speisialta idirfish. It's really important because it's at this time of the year that schools are revising their timetable and allocation resources for learning support. So there'll often be literacy support, there'll be maths support, numeracy support, literacy support in Irish and in English. Os Gaeilge go háirithe in na scoileanna Gaeltachta agus in na scoileanna Gaelscoileanna freisin. So the Achfannig Cur Fáil ag an Ryan, the Department of Education provides resources for schools, for learning support, for anybody with any particular difficulty. And the days of children being put in boxes and labelled are gone. And you have no qualms about informing the school about needs that your child might have. So I'll just go on now to the next slide when I'm giving you advice maybe about vocabulary. That's a big challenge in your hugging to this jacket does that. Remember that they're doing 8, 9, 10 new academic subjects like science, geography, history, home economics, music, technographics, business, folklore, and a lot of new vocabulary. And it's important. Now, I know that there's often a little booklet produced that they're given for the keywords, and there's this sort of section for each subject. I always found as a history teacher, the best thing to do was to take the copybook and say to them, put all the new words in the back of the book. Just have a list of vocabulary and all the new vocabulary you learn. And then once a week, maybe we'll have a little 10 minutes to go back over and learn them. And at home, I would go over that vocabulary with them myself, ask them, what was the vocabulary? Can we go over and practice it? It's become fairly commonplace nowadays for teachers to put a bank of vocabulary up on the whiteboard, before the class begins, in order to facilitate the students to take them down. So encourage them to have a vocabulary notebook and to go over it and learn the new vocabulary. Encourage them to get used to using a pocket dictionary, having it out on the desk with them before they need hÍde-bhunscoil na Bhaird. And in Coláiste, we've had up to a third of the students coming in from English medium primary schools. And I'd be glad to tell you that by Halloween, most of them had no further problems. They were very, very quiet for the first fortnight, and parents maybe wouldn't even have recognised, but I'll tell you, they're well able to go by Halloween very well, and many of them actually outstripping the others, because if they're coming in from a primary school, Os Bhaird, they're going to have to concentrate very hard in the first week, and that is developing considerable cognitive skills. So they're listening very hard there, and they're not taking it for granted, and it really does assist them in the overall approach to study skills. I've mentioned here a few resources that you yourself should become familiar and encourage your son or daughter to become familiar with. People are not really using, except maybe in the classroom, at home when they're working, they're going to use online dictionaries, because in the Irish language, printed dictionaries date so quickly. There's so much new vocabulary coming on stream that they need to be able to access. So you've got folklore.ie, Bhaird, Gaeilge English Irish Dictionary, Teanglan.ie, which is Gaeilge Bhaird Irish English, and that is a really valuable resource because it also gives a huge amount of grammar information and gives you a lot of information about the verbs in all the different tenses. And then Terma.ie then finally is a subject-specific dictionary. And say, for example, they're looking for the word for Mesolithic tomb. Well, you're not going to find it in folklore.ie, but you probably will find it on Terma.ie. Another really valuable resource, and I know I'm encouraging you about all of these, but this is one I really recommend. It's called the Riabhunscoil Mathematica. It's an e-dictionary. It's produced by SIA, which is from Northern Ireland, and they produce excellent resources. And it's available. Actually, it would be well worth your while looking at it. It's mentioned later. It's www.cea.ie, not.org.uk. Not only does it give you all the terms, the mathematical terms, but if you click into it and you click on that particular term, it actually shows you the trianton or whatever. It actually draws it for you and explains it. So it's well worth exploring yourself in order to show your child how to use it. Now, that brings me on to general advice, and I'm very conscious about running out of time. Some of this has already been addressed. Just one thing about Taistil, and I know that Pádraig mentioned Taistil, just to be aware that there is a possibility of getting a bus pass from Bus Éireann, and particularly those people who have Fíona or mBunscoil. You have to be 4.8 kilometres from the nearest Iar-bhunscoil long grade in the nearest post-primary Irish school, and you can access that through Bus Éireann. And you need to have, if you have a medical card, you're exempt. It's €350 a year. Not that many people go for it. It's 650 for the whole family. And you need your PPS number, and you'll also need the school roll number, which you can get online. So if you want to get onto Bus Éireann, you think you're more than 4.8 kilometres from the nearest Gaelcholáiste, and you think you'd like to get a bus pass because you don't want to be giving bus money every week, or you have a medical card and you're entitled to it for free. Now, many of these things, longer school days, moving classroom regularly, organisational skills have been discussed by Pádraig. Expect tiredness, even tears maybe in the first week. It's a long day, they need a good, healthy lunch for that. Extracurricular activities make the day even longer, but it's very important that they try out all those activities. They won't be able to keep them all up because there are so many different sports. Your school might have 4 different sports, like basketball, hurling, football, athletics. Can't keep them all up. Try them out. Don't buy the kit though until you know which ones are going to keep up. So we're talking with Ryan Ishkiti Corja Nua Corjas, the Usculta, the Corja Nua Yennet. Avoid cliques from the primary school. You're going to be people coming into this class who don't know anybody. Encourage your child to be friendly and open to making new friends. If you had issues in the primary school with regard to bullying, it's too late and you want your child to have a new start. It's too late to tell them when new class lists have been read out at the end of August. If there was a problem and you haven't drawn the school's attention to it, contact them in early August when they're back and say, look, there was an issue. I'd love my child to have a fresh start. Could you possibly separate them? Now, obviously, they're not going to take a list of people, but if you have one particular issue that you think would be great for your child, I would recommend that you do that. The first weeks can be challenging. Don't worry. As I said, by Halloween, things will have settled down. Encourage, I said, participation in extracurricular activities, because as part of the new JCPA or Junior Cycle Profile of Achievement, which is the new kind of chassis or certification, they're actually asked to write a piece, 200 words, about these or new areas, other areas of learning they participated in school. They were, I was captain of a team, I was on the debating team, I was in the book club, I was in the choir, that type of thing. There's a scope for that now in the junior cycle. As Pádraig said, let them sort out difficulties for themselves in the first place. Don't try and solve all their problems for them. Helicopter parenting isn't doing anybody any favours. What you're going to have to do is try and find the line between being a supportive parent and trying to clear the road for them all the time. They may come home with a problem, very upset about it one day, even in tears. 2 days later, they may have forgotten about it and you've been into school and it's really still eating you up. You know, just give it a chance, let things settle down. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is mBunscoil or social media. Now, if I were to say one thing that caused me the greatest grief in the final years as principal of the school, it would be social media. So I haven't got much time. I'm just going to go through the next slide, please. Keep a close eye on their access to social media. Do not allow mobile phones in the bedrooms at night. And just be aware of the fact that they may have a second mobile phone. You know, so if you're taking one away, just be aware of that. Ensure safety and privacy settings are activated. And keep yourself informed and up to date with new apps. Now, just don't close it off. You know, you must know about, like a couple of years ago, it was Snapchat, then it's TikTok. There's always a new one coming online. And a great way of doing that is to become familiar with the excellent site Webwise, www.webwise, which has got all the information that parents need on being kept up to date all the time. Next slide. I would say the social media causes a great deal of stress for students. They're available 24/7. I have seen lists of WhatsApp messages sent at 4 and 5 o'clock, 3, 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning by students to each other. Inappropriate material is easily available, including pornography. And I would say, particularly boys, very often, are looking at pornography online, and both, particularly, seems to have been a problem in my experience with boys. Sexting or Gaeloideachas, it's common, and don't assume it won't happen to your child. What do I mean by sexting? I mean exchanging inappropriate, intimate photographs of themselves. And this has happened, in my experience, in first years. It may even happen to the primary school. But don't wrap yourself up in cotton wool. Don't think it won't happen to your child or in your child's school. It's everywhere. The thing is, by the time they're in 5th and 6th year, they probably have copped themselves on more, and they're more aware of their own image, social media image. But at primary, it says first years have no concept of the serious implications of it. And parents must take responsibility to protect their children. Set your own rules for your own child, and don't mind what you're told other parents are doing. And my last slide here is, be careful of your own use. One of the things I've often heard students saying back to, well, my parents put photographs of me up online on Facebook and say funny things about things I did, or pictures that are embarrassing for them when they're older. So just be careful of your own use of social media. Limit screen time for all the family, and use meal time for conversation. I think probably when people were thrown together during the lockdown, a lot of families discovered that really sitting down, eating meals together and talking and discussing what's going on is a really valuable thing for your child. It's something that's very hard to get back if you don't start it. So be sensible as well about WhatsApp groups for parents, and particularly fake news on them. You often have stories about what happens in school, exaggerated, distorted. Just be careful, set the good example. And finally, just the importance of open communication and trust. One thing I always say to the parents is, just tell them you're not shockable. If they think you're very conservative, you just don't know, you're not with us, what's going on today, they'll be probably afraid to tell you things that have happened. Just say, look, I know what's out there, I'm aware of this, I was young myself. Now, when we were at school, there was plenty of notes passed around, plenty of people drawing dirty pictures and so on, but the thing was, they ended up in the waste paper basket at the end of the day. That doesn't happen now with social media. So you actually really need to talk to them, as Pádraig said, open communication and trust. You're not shockable. Sit down, spend time. The greatest gift you can give your child is to give them your time. And mBunscoil, I'd just like to really reassure you of your decision to have chosen an all-Irish school for your children. It's a decision that many of you may regret that you didn't get the opportunity to become fluent Irish speakers yourself. It's making the choice, I think, and you're giving them a really valuable and enriching gift. It's a choice I made for my own children, and it's certainly, when they're all in their 30s now, it's certainly one I never regretted. Not only will they come to respect the language and love the language, the history, culture, and all the tradition that goes with it, but I have found that Gaeloideachas gives them a great openness and appreciation of other cultures as well. So, b'whailim dúr gach ratha riarab, agus ganairi live agus they were boshi, agus shiva tusi amach, the mohur shut nua shut aro. Vermont.
Nina, gonna meet Mahagad agus an Jara Pachin again today. Tam I conscious of school chan hoch the clog.
Oh, just a lua when COVID slides at them shaking when COVID. Yeah, I feel just buckle rope we shin.
Yeah. I'm straight in the shower for so.
Yeah, just my husband through COVID and hÍde. I push up slides. The Department of Education issued interim, that's the important thing that Michal mentioned at the beginning, it's interim advice. This could change between now and the end of August, as of the 1st of July 2020, and I have extracted from that long information for schools, boards of management, teachers, etc. What's of importance for parents. So there are 6 slides there, advice for parents, and they go on, and then there's advice for students, checklist for parents, and advice for students. So I recommend that you go through that yourself, perhaps, in August, provided there hasn't been further advice since. But it's probably a little bit early now, but just some very practical and sensible advice. I've extracted what's appropriate to second level and what's appropriate to parents. That's the last 6 slides, and they'll be available. Yeah, that's Mr. Creationhan.
But I mean, what Fíona, agus mar dús mé tá sé searfad le fáil, sé searfad fáil Steve Gaeloideachas data a couple of them going, all of this PowerPoint, all these checklists, especially the last ones that might have a chance to go through, will be available online. I'm going to ask you maybe for 5 to 6 minutes more. Just I'm conscious that some of the questions were answered, but I'm just I've got 1 or 2 questions here that I might ask, and so basically one of the things I suppose is that parents feel sometimes that they're very much involved in the child's life in in primary school, and that sometimes when they come into secondary school, that suddenly their involvement in their child's education is limited. What advice would you give Pádraig? What might you Pádraig ar dús ó hí bran party has no you know, and I'm conscious that maybe some of this will be asked.
Yeah, well, I suppose what I would say is it is a new change. I mentioned that already, and you know, really the student is becoming much more independent. So in that sense, it is a change both for the parent and for the child. And like I said, kind of in the presentation, indeed, Fíona referred to it as also, it's, you know, support them and keep the communication open and maybe ask them the questions, maybe practice some of the things with them. Try and make it a thing where it's a sort of, we're in this together, rather than, you know, where it becomes a thing of do this, do that, do the other, where you end up nagging or telling them what to do. Very often they'll just kind of go against that. So if, you know, we mentioned the word communication an awful lot, but if you're communicating, I'm there to support you, and together we can, you know, make this as easy as possible, then I think that's much more productive rather than, as I say, telling them what to do. I suppose the other thing about the parent in some ways is, if the more information that you have, the more you're able to support your child. And again, coming back to the word communication and connection, you know, if you're unclear or unsure of anything, you know, ask. I'm always mindful of the ad of the guy with, you know, standing up on the bus, I don't know what a tracker mortgage is. You know, don't be afraid to sort of contact the school, the relevant person, and say, I don't know what this is. Because, you know, the students or the school is there to support the student and you as well. So when you're working together, then they'll be more than happy to help you out and to support you in that. The other key thing, I suppose, as well is, you know, where there are meetings, like the parent-teacher meetings that will be held during the year, to really try and make them, if you can't, kind of contact the school and get some feedback anyway. And then as well, you know, I think we might have mentioned in some of the slides, parent-teachers association, or a parents association. So every school will have a parents association. It's just a way of connection as well with the school, and potentially you get to meet kind of the staff a little bit more, and or the principal or so on, and that kind of is a good way of kind of keeping a connection as well. You know, there are supports out there, you know, in terms of the slides that we've mentioned. You know, you mentioned homework, Michal. I'd say, right, do your homework, read some of the information. The National Parents Post-Primary, the Council at Post-Primary level, they'll be there to support you as well.
Okay, I suppose we're conscious that we're transfers between primary busy secondary school, but also I suppose parents would be thinking, especially in the medium, especially with medium Gaelige or Gaeltacht Gaelige, that we're also conscious maybe of the children going on ahead, say the third level, and that sometimes we feel maybe they're disadvantaged if they've done their leaving certs and all the terminology that they're a disadvantage when they come into third level, and maybe sometimes a huge percentage of children, of course, will not go on to courses because some, you know, they're not there at the moment. Hopefully that might change over the next few years. What would you advise parents in that regard, Fíona?
Well, the first thing I'd advise them is not to worry about it, because Coláiste, Gaelcholáiste, my neighbouring school, boys' school, have been 50 years on the go now, and have been pushing students on. They're practically 100% transfer to third level. We really do not find that the students come back with any difficulties. Occasionally they will mention the science subjects if they've had their education completely through the medium of Irish from primary school, that it takes them a couple of weeks at the beginning just to adjust to the vocabulary. But remember, they've already done that when they came into second level school, so they're well used. They have those cognitive skills and abilities. Very often the textbooks as well that they're using for Leaving Cert will be in English, or maybe extra notes that they've used. So basically these children are bilingual in terms of these subjects. They're well able to adjust, and I think that the skills that they have developed through Coláiste or immersion education and bilingual, you know, work, that they are well able to cope with the challenges at third level. And I think, you know, as I mentioned, they have a great confidence nowadays. And that really stands to them in good stand when they go on to third level. So we send a lot of students on to university, to colleges of technology, primary school teaching, and we have yet really to encounter difficulties. The only difficulty that we would encounter is, and much too early to be worrying about that now, is students who pick the wrong course, or maybe tend to pick a course because they had got the points for it and they don't want to waste their points doing a course, and in fact one that they might, in fact I'm sure Pádraig would agree with that, one that they would be more interested in. So that would be where we would see difficulty sometimes with students wanting to change course, which can be quite an expensive thing to do.
You talked about difficulties there, the word difficulties, and I suppose we're very conscious of the fact that most primary schools will have sent on information about your child as regards your difficulties that your child might have, or anything like that, that they would have sent on that information already. I'm just conscious maybe that you know, other difficulties might come in first year, maybe second year, difficulties with, you know, language difficulties, health difficulties, I suppose emotional difficulties, and all of that. And I'm thinking maybe out loud here, but I think sometimes in an Irish medium school, that in Irish medium education, that maybe parents would be more worried about it, that, you know, not only are they dealing with that particular problem, whatever it is, but they're also dealing with the problem of language and how to maybe to master the language, etc., etc. Pádraig, will you swing to it for Shane?
Well, I refer back, I think, to the key word of communication.
Okay.
And communicating with the student, you know, as a parent, and communicating with the school. You know, and I suppose communicating with the student, because oftentimes we as parents can be more worried about an issue that perhaps the student isn't worried about. As Fíona said, they've forgotten it kind of 2 days later, or maybe they are worried about it, but we won't know that. Sometimes we can have an idea in our head that isn't actually the reality. So until we can have a chat with them about it, maybe, or we're observing them, we actually don't know. The other thing then, as I say, is, you know, communicate with the school. Very often I, as a guidance counsellor, I'd say, you know, you find out sort of through somebody or a friend, and I'm beginning thinking that maybe there was a death, or, you know, particularly kind of in COVID-19 land, that, you know, things have happened to families and may happen between now and September, or in the first kind of few years and so on. Let the school know, you know, let, again, who is the key people, kind of the year head, the guidance counsellor, if it's an issue perhaps with special needs, a special needs coordinator, principal, deputy, people like that. They're more than happy to kind of meet you, have a chat with you, ring you back, or send you an email and so on. So really the key message I think I keep coming back to is communicate. Communicate with the student and communicate with the school.
Okay. Fíona, will you like correlation?
Well, just the role that we, of course, cover so much about communication, that with COVID-19 that may be a little bit more challenging this year, because obviously parents are not going to be able to go into the school as freely as before. Now, there's two things there. First of all, you may be very well used to going into the school, in the primary school, and your child is absolutely delighted to bring you in and show you off to all his friends or her friends, and you're going to come to a situation now where they probably prefer to be on the floor of the car than to be seen in the same car as you. So I would very often have parents asking, could they come in to see me, and but couldn't possibly ensure that their child won't see them coming in. So maybe this year it's going to be the case where you're going to have to communicate by email more with the year head or with the school, because coming into the school is going to be more challenging. I know that's in the guidance from the Department of Education, and I mean, hopefully there will be meetings for first year parents, particularly to discuss areas like the new junior cycle with you and give you information on that. But it's possible that they may be by Zoom, and it's possible that maybe some of your communication, but don't let that put you off, because you phone, leave a message, the year head, the class teacher, the deputy principal, or the principal, somebody will get back to you and deal with your issues. But don't be put off by the fact that your son or daughter doesn't want to see you near the school. It's always possible to communicate by email or by phone.
Okay, Corla Anwa Hanchinaginzera. We're leis an vers cantúirí, go míle maithagaí, tá cínte go maiach banán níos mó níos mó ámagain PC level kind. I thank you, everyone that's been listening to us this evening. And I ask you, before you go, just one small little thing, two small little things actually. There is a poll being conducted online. That's just to kind of give us an idea of you know, how you found out about the course and what we need, maybe what other courses we need to do, and if a few minutes, it only takes a few minutes to do that. The other thing I will ask you to do, I suppose, Freshen, is just we are, I suppose, putting together tonight and looking at various things. We have looked at the possibility of maybe having a seminar about the junior cert. Fíona and Pádraig there both mentioned the cert reforms. The junior cert is a little bit different from the junior cert that you might have had. that you might have done, and so on. And so we're thinking about planning maybe another seminar on the junior cert for parents. You know, maybe bringing the jargon down out of it and be just practically showing you what you expect the next few years, the first few years of your child's education Gedara level. So by course no seminar Elina agan Savour Bonnie and Strasosherach mu Tasos Gadata. Just right in front of you there, you can see the Gaeltacht, the Irish for Parents there's quite a lot of YouTube videos from Gaeloideachas, the Jim Cora, the newsletter that I've asked you to, to look at, maybe getting this newsletter through your email. There's also a Facebook group that's for parents that their children are into the into the medium of Irish, if they're getting the medium through Irish. This is just a group that kind of gets a chance to look at different stuff that comes up, etc., etc. And all of that is again, the best way to find any of that information is really to go get in touch with Gaeloideachas and everything like that. As I said, tonight's seminar is being recorded and will be shown, and the content will be on the website in the next few days. So I really do thank you, and I do apologize that we went a little bit over time, but I suppose it's a good thing really in one way. I want to thank the people, the office, people in Gaeloideachas who put it together. We did all the work together, who resourced all the stuff together. Buíochas go hallaghaine tá gobar nefik Gaeloideachas, agus buíochas freshin gonna kaintúirí nacht, agus buíochas tíbse Hishmahari. Thank you very, very much. All that information is up there, as you can see. I really, really do thank you, and I do thank you for all the support. I presume it's probably one of the last seminars that Gaeloideachas will have this term as such, or this school year, but we will be back at Easter again, or in the new term again, in autumn again, and we will look forward to talking to you again. So for me, Mila Mahagi Agus an Gitania as amazing conservative Tapaki Agus Sulagam no Anshid Fíona Gaeltacht Niwani Giri are Fudna Heading Del Shachtan. So Panigitania as Ingrian Toki Gishkicha Agus then with the kind of support for the Mila Mahagi. Thank you very much.